An elven warrior trapped on modern-day Earth. Two friends with different destinies meet at a magical school. These are some of the stories we at Electric Lips Comics are working on. You can get your copies of both The Mana Chronicles and Tales of Itherel at elpmerch.com. Support independent creators. Explore the merch featuring exciting ELP Comics art with a wide range of designs. Electric Lips Comics. Imagination electrified.
Welcome, everyone, to another Conversations in the Void. I'm your host, Graveyard, joined as always with my off-screen producer, Salem. Make sure to say hi to Salem in the chat. He loves each and every one of you. He knows it. He just tells me secretly. All right, so before we begin, I'd just like to say, if anyone is in the Chicagoland area and is going to the Days of the Dead Con here in 2 weekends of 2024, we will be there at a table. We hope to see you there. We'll have some great fun. All right, so without further ado, he is an actor, comedian, author with works including The Vein, also works in Culture Magazine and Anaheim the Film. Please welcome to the Void, the one and only Jasen T Davis.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Doing great. I managed to get signed up with a talent agency called Posh Talent Agency, so I'm very happy.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Networking works.
Oh yeah. It's part of why I do the show. Not only do I get to talk to people like yourself and learn behind the scenes of everything, but it's a network that I like to build too, of friends and family.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's good to have practice. I usually interview people, so being interviewed is, you get used to
it. Yeah, it's very odd. I was on a show a couple days ago on someone else's show, and it was using StreamYard, and I do multiple StreamYard channels, and I just go, I don't have to touch anything. This is weird for me.
Nice. No, it's fun. Yeah, I try to be fun and interesting and not be boring.
Yeah. All right, so Jasen, let's get to a little bit know more about you. So what really brought you into the world of acting and script writing? Was there anything like you remember from a childhood that like you saw a particular movie, TV show, like I want to do that with my life?
I appreciate the art of film, and I appreciate a very good script. I appreciate good writing. I'm a big fan of comic books. I'm a big fan of Grant Morrison. I'm a big fan of Matt Wagner and Matt Wagner's Grendel. And I'm a big fan of Alan Moore. I love Stephen King. So I wanted to be like those guys, and I wanted to work in film, but I also love the film industry. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever seen the movie Tapeheads with John Cusack, that was a big thing. Like, I just would watch Tapeheads and go, well, that's getting into film. That's getting into Hollywood. It's chaos, but you'll eventually make it. And I'm still trying to make it.
Yeah, it's I heard a rough industry. I heard, but we talked to lots of people that they work 300 days a week. It's just there's work. It's just not everyone's going to be the Brad Pitt, the George Clooney's, the Timothy Chalamets.
Oh, and trust me, the Brad Pitts and the George Clooney's don't enjoy being the Brad Pitts and the George Clooney's. That's a whole fame machine that you can tap into if you want. It's there for you. But you want to be really pretty if you're into that.
All right, so not for me. Got it.
Oh, you're fine. It's like people who are very good looking. There's an actor that I'm a fan of named Jeff Dujardin. The guy looks like a great looking version of Errol Flynn, and I hope he makes it. And he's been doing work, but that's the kind of guy who's going to be big and famous and going places. He's great. People like me are, we're the funny guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's our job. We're funny.
Yeah, character actors, right?
Yeah, and writers, comedians, jokes. I'm very good at doing jokes too.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into your joking work, stuff like that, do you recall, Jasen, what was your first horror movie that you ever saw that you can recall?
Angel Heart.
Oh.
Yeah. I saw that when I was in elementary school, and I liked that one. because I didn't really know what the hell was going on. And then the other one that I remember watching with my babysitter was American Werewolf in London.
Ooh, that's a classic.
And my parents knew I was really smart growing up, so I didn't care about horror films. They didn't give me nightmares. They were like fairy tales to me. So I was seeing horror films in elementary school in like the 70s and 80s. So I watched all those films, the big classics you remember. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, it never caused me to have problems. Although now I work in the industry writing horror, so I guess that was a side effect.
Yeah, my parents were always concerned with that gave me nightmares. But other than Jaws, no horror movie has scared me. I grew up watching them. And now I make independent horror movies. Huh. What weird
Good,
world.
good, dude, good. That's the dream. The dream is there. You can do the dream.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big industry now.
Oh, yeah. So, with all your knowledge and depth that you have of the movie, do you have any horror IP or franchise? You just go, I don't get the appeal of it.
I don't like torture porn,
Mm-hmm.
like Sallow, the Martyrs. I have a big respect for Terrifier and the guy who directed Terrifier and the Terrifier series. Hostel, that's another one. Cube. People just getting tortured and torn apart. Oh, Saw. I respect them. They are definitely a part of the genre. They're like the weird satanic evil world genre. But I just can't watch that. I feel bad when human beings get blown up for ill-designed reasons. I just feel terrible.
Yeah, my wife doesn't like the newer torture porn. Like it
Oh,
said, she watches slasher and body horror, like Cronenberg stuff from the 70s, 80s. Absolutely
yeah,
fine. Absolutely
yeah.
fine. But then you get into the Hostels, you get into the Cabin Fevers, a lot of Eli Roth stuff.
Oh
You know,
yeah, just especially when you're seeing women getting, you know, flayed alive and screaming, and you're just going, I would never want that to happen to my family or friends. So,
right?
you know, it's one of those. But other horror movies, you know, yes, I do respect that. I love it. Like Drag Me to Hell, The Thing, movies like that. I'm totally into it. You know, Nightmare on Elm Street. But the one where they're chained to a wall being beaten to death, that's no good.
Right. And yeah, and I get that. You know, we some of our independent stuff that we do, we did a sequel to a movie from last year, this year, and there's kill tapes, and you know, people have labeled them as graphic. And I go, they're nowhere like Terrifier. It's just implied
Oh,
terror. So
oh
we
yeah,
don't have the budget for that kind of effects.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
So
Especially you know, with
yeah.
Terrifier, they really are going to the next level, and they're taking advantage of the fact that people are tired of CGI. CGI
Mhm.
has been done to death, and so when they do practical effects, that's still a lot of work, and I respect it. They definitely put practical effects into Terrifier and the whole series.
Yeah. I would say the newest one though, there's a lot more CGI than
Oh,
what
okay.
was needed.
Well, you can't really volunteer people to take an impact like that from a chainsaw. So no matter how many waivers you get them to sign, eventually the police will get involved. So you're going to need CGI.
So, but then Jason, on the flip side, what is a horror IP or franchise or movie even that you, when someone tells you they've never seen it, you just go like, all right, stop whatever you're doing, you're watching it right now.
Huh, man. You know, I hate to be one of those guys that is like, you have to watch this movie, or for the love of God, what is your problem? Um, and it's because, you know, horror. It's like 31 flavors. You
Hmm.
know, your flavor of horror. So if you said, Jason, I really like body horror. You know, I'm really into body horror. I'm not. I'm kind of like scared of body horror. Like, oh, you know, it's scary. You're trying to eat pizza and then a body horror movie's on. If you'd never seen The Thing, I would tell you to watch The Thing and not watch any of the other things. I would, if you liked body horror, I would tell you to watch The Beyond. You gotta watch The Beyond. Another one is there's a The Society. That was a body horror film from
Hmm.
the 80s. So that's how I am. Is that if you tell me you're fond of a particular genre, I will suggest one to you. Personally, like if you wanted to say, well, the ultimate horror film, that's rough. There's so many different flavors of horror, and I'm a big fan of a lot of it. So
Right.
that's rough. Oh, Aliens 1 and 2. Aliens 1 and 2, that's so complete. That's such perfect horror. You can't, like, wow, the rest were whatever. But Aliens 1 and 2, I feel, would appeal to anybody, no matter what they were, who they were. If they had not seen Aliens 1 and 2, I would tell them to go watch it. That will fulfill your every desire.
Yeah, Aliens is one of my producer's favorite movies of all time. So
Yeah, yeah, very quotable.
oh, for sure. And we always have that conversation of on our other show that we do is it horror or not, right? So I have a horror tattoo sleeve on my arm, but it's all 80s. On
Yeah,
my sci-fi leg on the back, I have an alien and a predator.
yeah, I admire your dedication.
So I threw it on there just because it's good. Just kind of having the back of the leg, just have the back of the leg be sci-fi horror.
I always felt that Predator 2 was also a great example of cyberpunk. That the world of Predator 2, when you're looking at the Predator movie, they're in a jungle, and then Predator 2, obviously Predator's in the big city. Spoiler alert. And the city that Predator is in is this hyper violent, hyper sexualized, completely technological. People are just losing their damn minds, and that's so cyberpunk that Predator 2, crosses genres. That
Right.
you wish you could still follow that character after he survives encountering Predator, because that world looks like a great fucked up cop flick.
Yeah, set in the distant future of 1997.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, everyone remembers those days.
Like that's not what my 97 looked like, but
Gosh, I was watching Strange Days, and like the big thing in Strange Days is they're in, I think, 2010. It's like that's the future for them, and you're watching going, no, it didn't end up like that, but good try.
well, I mean, we're only 5 years away from the great robot war of Terminator.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh well, that's a bummer. Well, the first ones will have rubber like faces. They're easy to
Mhm.
spot. Dogs can bark and detect them. What can you do?
Exactly. All right, Jason. So let's get into you and your bulk of work. So, how did you get into writing? Did you have it from like an itch from an early age?
I was always writing. I was into a lot of role playing games. I was always writing stories. I took a lot of classes. I read a lot of fiction. I was reading Stephen King in the '80s. I read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft. Read a lot of O'Neill and other authors of like really shock fiction. Like a lot of children, I grew up watching The Twilight Zone and The Outer
Mm-hmm.
Limits. And have you ever heard of the Tales from the Dark Side, the old one?
Yes. Yes.
Oh man, those intro credits when you were in elementary school at like midnight would scare you, and then there's a dark side, and it turns reversed and it's black and white. And I love Tales from the Dark Side. It was just I love those sorts of short fiction. So later on, I took a lot of classes and I entered a lot of contests. And I worked for magazines writing humor and whatnot and writing columns. And I eventually wrote a horror film script called The Populace. I
Mm-hmm.
won some awards with it, and I keep trying to sell it. And every time it's about to get sold, something happens, like a strike or COVID. But we're getting there. And I have an agent now, so that will help. But when I won awards for The Populace and had directors read it and go, no, this is a good work, you could do this, it gave me a lot of faith. And especially when you're taking classes, the teachers who teach the classes are very good at breaking away a lot of bad ideas that a person can bring to the table, but bringing out your good ideas and
Huh.
getting you to have confidence in yourself. That's a good teacher, where they don't want you to think like them; they want you to think like you. And I had a lot of good teachers like that that really helped me. So I'm still I'm working on it. I've written other I've written children's animation, and I've written obviously comic books. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
still doing that, and then I write comedy because I am a comedian. So there you go. A lot of writing.
Right. So
Right.
So I mean, with Populous, I was able to read. I got through most of the script, but I also was able to read the Vane comic that you sent me. Is there any chance you think if Populous doesn't get made into a movie right away that you'd maybe turn it into a comic series for the time being?
What I like about the Populace is the way I wrote it is I was really aware of franchises. You know, when you watch like any like Friday the 13th, when you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, there's a franchise.
Right.
And when I wrote the Populace, I wanted other people to write their versions of the Populace. So when you're reading the Populace, because they're in this information bubble, there could be a populace going on all around them that is individual to every city. You could have a populace based on Russia. You could also have prequels to find out what the heck happened. So that's what I was thinking of. Is I was thinking of how if you wanted to do a comic book series or animated series, yeah, easily. And it would be smart. You're very smart. It'd be smart to turn the populace into a graphic novel and then see what people think.
Right. Friend of the channel the guys I get to know very well over the past couple of years is Night of the Chihuahuas. So it was a low budget indie movie in like 2007, 2008. And now it's a comic series. They finished their first run of that. And now they have the original movie and then they have the comic. And now they're using that as almost their pitch deck to make another Night of the Chihuahuas movie.
Nice. Yeah, originally The Matrix was a graphic novel, and they used the graphic novel to pitch the movie. So it works. It works, and I think it's easier for people to see the visualization because there's a lot connected to comic books, graphic novels, and film when it comes to visualization.
Right. And with the team I'm part of, Horror Dads, I just keep telling them, like, there's stories that we want to tell that we don't have the budget to do right now. So we're making movies. Why don't we do other stories in this world as a comic book? And then we can go, hey, we have comic books. Here's the story we want to do. Here's the other movies. Let's make it happen and do a cross media spread that as much as you can.
Very true. And the thing is, CGI is expensive. We can't get AI to do it yet. And so I think that comic books are still going to be a visual medium that dominates over film. Because as much as there's a great amount of film going on, there, Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and the list goes on, and Roku and Tubi, and oh my gosh, there's still a lot of comic books going on, a lot of self-published comics. I'm working on a comic book called Detroit City, which is basically superheroes in Detroit City. And, comic books themselves are about heroes. Well, all comic book heroes are sci-fi. Everything is sci-fi, really, or sci-fi horror. The Fantastic Four is sci-fi, but the Thing is body horror.
Yes.
The character, the Thing.
Right.
So I think that comic books are going to dominate for a long time until someone like you or me has an app on their computer that can turn the images in our head into something equal to CGI today, which is going to take a while to be able to do.
Oh yeah, trust me. I do IT for a living, and I tried to use AI to create subtitle files, and it's far from being there.
Yeah, well, it's work. It's not Skynet yet.
Not yet. 5 more years. 5 more years we got. So talking about your comic book work and the vein, there's a lot of pop culture references that you have in there. So was that all written by you, or is that like the collaboration with your artists to get all that stuff kind of hidden in there?
Well, a lot of when I wrote The Vein, I wrote it kind of like being Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, or Stephen King. I put in a lot of hidden like references. I put in a lot of foreshadowing. I put in a lot of symbolism, and I did a lot of things to show that the character T is already manipulating things around him. Like when Uncle Bob says, "I want you to do this," T responds by taking a very long shower and getting ready, and then going, "Hey, sorry, I got to get to the bus."
Yep.
Now he's showing that he can manipulate time to get out of doing chores, because obviously Uncle Bob can't go, well, you have to miss the bus and do chores because he's going to college. So
Right.
I did these things. I tried to show characters that had relationships, and a lot of my motivation in comics is relationships, because something that that the creator of the comic and the editor and I all agreed on is that the characters wouldn't just be these people who were there to make the hero look good. Every character in the vein is very, very interesting. They deserve a comic themselves. I thought that Fabio, he represents a lot of bullying attitudes that everyone's familiar with.
Hmm.
And my point is that when you look at Spider-Man, the vein is 50% Spider-Man. It's like the Venom mixed with Spider-Man. That's
Yeah,
the vein.
I can see that.
And Flash Thompson bullies Peter Parker in a very physical way.
Yes.
And we all remember that. But there's another issue people forget about Flash Thompson. At one point, Spider Man or Peter Parker realizes he has strength and threatens to beat up Flash Thompson and gets physical with him. Flash Thompson then responds by playing the victim, by acting like Peter Parker is crazy, and he starts a campaign against him. So
Hmm.
Fabio was like that kind of bully. He's a social bully, to where it's not like Flash Thompson where it's so overt. And instead, you have Fabio, who's a social bully. You have April Ayers, who's very, very intelligent. But then she has this like really foul mouth when she's screaming at Fabio. And all the characters were cool like that. Even Uncle Bob, you feel this pain with Uncle Bob. Like he's good at words, but that's the only thing he's good at. That his days of wrestling and playing football and winning spelling bees are kind of his glory days, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, and I think I kin that to almost like, say, when Spawn the comic started in the '90s with Image, that you had you know Angelica spin-off, you had Sam and Twitch, the cops spin-off, that were side characters but have an interesting story, which is what you're saying with Fabio and everyone else that you're building in the vein.
Yeah. And later on, the editor and David, they changed a lot of the language. They added things like they changed T's name to Squid. They replaced a lot of jokes and put in jokes that were references to like jokes from the '90s and whatnot.
Hmm.
And we removed references like I got into my own head and I made reference to Generation X music,
Yeah.
and I really should have been more modern. So like I made a reference to the Talking Heads, and I realized who the heck is going to understand where the hell the Talking Heads came from or that they even exist. So so it became a collaborative effort, which is very Hollywood. That's how it is when you're working on TV shows and sitcoms. Is a film that's you writing the script, but if you're doing a sitcom or a series, you would be the one in charge of the series. That would be David LeCompte. Everybody else becomes like a co-writer that realizes your vision, but you get to modify things afterwards. So the vein started one way, like I was the author, and then afterwards it just became all of us were the author. That all of us were the author, and I was cool with that. We had a fight at one point because they replaced two of my jokes with jokes that were straight ripped off, and I had to tell them, guys, we can't rip off those jokes. We also got into trouble because we I wrote that Sun Eater was not supposed to look like Cookie Monster from Sesame Street, and at the end he ended up looking like Cookie Monster from Sesame Street, despite what I wrote. And
Right.
now we have to be careful because that could be a copyright infringement. So it's just those things where if all of us had been in the same room, it would have been fine. But what I'm very happy about is that the comic book became a collaborative effort. And a collaborative effort to me is much more interesting than a dude who writes all by himself in a hole. I like to hear when people get together, like Eastman and Laird.
Right.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a multi-billion-dollar franchise because those guys are willing to go back and forth and come up with ideas together.
Yeah, and when I talk to people that make comics, especially horror and body horror comics, I always have to ask and want to know is, do you ever look at a panel and go, that's too extreme, we have to dial it back, or you ever go, that's not extreme enough?
That all depends on the comic and what you're trying to go for. with David, he was very intelligent in that when I write the art for a comic, I keep it basic. But when you're dealing with a comic that's done by an artist who's already like it's called an art-driven comic, my job is to give him like ideals and forms to work with. He then builds upon it to do whatever the heck he wants. And of course, his images were brilliant. You know, his art is incredible. Um, and whereas if I was the writer, you have to maybe rein in the art. You have to tell the artist not to do too much if you're trying to deliver a message. But for this comic, we really were giving people a visual smorgasbord. And what I love about the Vane comic is it's not just what's going on. Look in the background. The backgrounds are hilarious. They're gross, but they are hilarious. They really remind you of the old Judge Dredd comics that had like a lot of these cityscapes going on where it was just horrifying, and then you're just paying attention to this one character, but there's this world around them.
Right. I did catch Homer in the background one of the scenes.
Yeah, great work. Great work.
So, I mean, that's, you know, with your writing, you know, obviously you write comedy and horror, you know, how do you feel like they marriage together? Because I talk to a lot of people that are able to, you know, we see people like Jordan Peele, who's a comedian that does horror really well, and you have that marriage too. Why do you think they go hand in hand so well?
Stephen King said that horror and comedy were Siamese twins. And you know, hey, he's Stephen King. He has a way of words, and he's right. I don't know why, because here's why. Comedy is based on an idea, suspense, and then the surprise. Hopefully, the surprise is intelligent. Hopefully, the surprise challenges you and is new. And then horror, same thing. That if a person just has vampires eating people, it's cool, but don't you want to say more about the human condition than vampires eating people? So if you get deeper, like, have you ever seen Forever Night?
I don't think so.
Forever Night was a Canadian vampire series about a dude who's a vampire who becomes a detective in Canada. And it's a precursor to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer seems to borrow a lot from Forever Night.
Okay.
Well, there's a character in Forever Night named Lacroix. Lacroix is a very old vampire that's kind of like Hannibal Lecter, but he's a vampire. His most impressive moment is when he becomes a radio DJ. And as this radio DJ, you know, he has a big ego because he's a vampire. He loves the fact he's getting attention. He loves the fact he gets to taunt the hero, and he works at night. And I always felt that Lacroix was much more interesting as a radio DJ. I wanted to watch that show, and you know, that was funny to me. And there you go. It was horror and comedy meeting each other in the same episode. Buffy has moments of horror and comedy, and that's what makes it so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I am a huge fan of this book series, The Dresden Files, right, which is fantasy, horror, and comedy, and noir.
Yeah, very beautiful. And you're right. Noir is a huge element of sci-fi. Frankenstein is very noir.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I agree. Like, you're setting up, you know, you build up that suspense in horror, and then you have the reveal, right? And it's akin to telling the joke, and then you build it up, and then you have the punchline.
Yes, sir. Have you ever seen the first The Howling?
Yes.
Oh, do you remember when the werewolf is in the office and the woman reaches over for the file and the werewolf has the file?
Yes.
Why is that scene great? Why do you like it?
You're expecting something more to happen.
I love that scene because the director communicates several things to you really fast. One, the werewolf is very quiet. He was able to sneak up on her and be right next to her despite his mass and ferociousness, and she never noticed, so he's quiet. Well, that's terrible. Two, his reveal is completely a shock. He's just the werewolf, and he's there looking at you holding a file.
Yeah.
And what's horrible about him holding the file and giving it to her is the werewolf is intelligent and has a sense of humor. So you're not dealing with a wild bear that just barged in and is sniffing for marshmallows. This is an evil being that takes great pleasure in surprising her instead of just whacking her head off. And
Right.
that's what was so great about that reveal. It is funny, but it communicates a lot in just one file, you know?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I agree that that scene works well, and you have comedy and horror that go, when done well, work
Mm-hmm.
beautifully. A good horror comedy is fantastic. Obviously, a bad one is either comedic or horrific sometimes, but
Yeah, yeah. You got to be careful. You can't get slapstick. You don't want to make fun of you don't want to turn the monster into a punchline. You
mm-hmm.
know, there's no fun to see the monster do what they do.
I mean, unless you're Abbott at Costello.
Oh yeah, that was the end. Once they started doing that, you know, one day they're gonna have to do an Abbott and Costello for Freddy. They're gonna have to do an Abbott and Costello for Jason. I don't even know what Michael Myers is anymore. Is Michael Myers a zombie or what is it? What's going on?
He's ground meat at this point in time now.
Good God. What's sad is Halloween 3 explains what Michael Myers is. If you ever watch Halloween 3, but
Mm-hmm.
it was so crazily removed from 1 and 2 that nobody understood it. But 3 is actually the solution to what the hell's going on in Halloween. It's hilarious.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's all my all time favorites. That's why he's on right there, my horror sleeve.
He's beautiful. It's that the way that I like the way that his character is so interesting is it could be anywhere or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who's big and crazy could put on that outfit and hunt people down. And
Oh
he's in the
yeah,
suburbs too. There's no escape.
yeah, of Illinois, not that far from me.
Oh, that's right. Oh, shoot. He could be around. He could take a taxi. You know, he can
Exactly.
drive. He drives a car in the first movie, so he could be driving a
Very
car.
well for never having driven before.
Well, he was crazy. Gave him confidence.
Exactly. Exactly. So let me ask, without spoiling anything about the vein and everything like that, do you have the series plan? Do you guys have the series planned out as a like a limited series? Or you kind of like exploring this whole vast world that you guys are building up here?
I only wrote the first one, and I wrote the origin story. Like that was my big job, is to create the origin story. And then I didn't want to write the second one because I got started doing Hollywood film scripts all the time, and a Hollywood film script, it's a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of meetings, and so David is doing the vein number 2, but the vein number 1, you know, what I like about the series is it's really just a lot of very short story ideas that loosely attach. So when you're thinking of the series, you're not going to have this long arc where like Uncle Bob finds himself. It's not going to be like Breaking Bad. It's more like shock and schlock. It's intended to be fast, funny humor, but not getting too deep into the human condition, which I respect. And I tried to put a lot of that into the first comic because you know when you're writing the origin story, you're very concerned about the origin story. That origin story is going to affect that character for the rest of their lives, and
Right.
that was the fun part. But beyond that, I didn't want to write the vein. And, you know, it's also kind of a gross comic, but I enjoyed writing the first one. But yeah, it's a lot to like some of the descriptions. I'm going, oh my god, I gotta like write the second issue. But I enjoyed writing the first issue. It was incredible.
That's awesome. So, fingers crossed, hopefully it becomes maybe an animated series on, say, HBO, and you can be the series director.
That'd be fun. It's you know, it's weird because Invincible did everything it could to be different than the series, and I respected that. Where you know you don't want to see a carbon copy of something animated, but you do. And
Right.
like a lot of Batman has been able to take graphic novels and then put them right to animation and they do well. But Invincible has managed to be very fun to watch because it's different than the original source material. And even the original writer says that, you know, well, I'm a better writer now. So I'm sure if David were to do The Vein for animation, he would do a lot of different ideas now. And possibly, you know, work with other creators to create different, like it'd be more like the Matrix, I'd imagine, Where in The Matrix, they worked with a lot of different artists. And I can imagine David working with different writers and artists to create more of an anthology. Because we had different artists for the cover of the vein, too.
Yeah. Almost like the Animatrix.
Yeah. Oh, the Animatrix. That's what I meant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like the Animatrix, where they had a lot of different. That was great. I love that. And that's what I'm hoping to see with the vein is they have a lot of different writers that can take the whole story and keep going with it, but also add their own jokes and be part of a different team. It would be very fascinating to read the second one that way.
Yeah. I have something newly in my head that I want to do for short films, and I want to make it as global as possible.
Nice.
Where I want to do essentially a Killer Beard franchise, but have different person write it and make it every single one, and just try to get as many people in different countries to tell their own stories of it.
Okay, Killer Beard.
Yeah, Killer Beard.
Killer Beard. I can see Killer Beard.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah. It's like going out with tentacles. It can get people. It's a beard.
But I'd love to see all different styles of it too, and see what people do with it, just to get crazy.
Well, especially if you take Killer Beard and really go horror with it, I can imagine a killer that has a gigantic beard and then is just murdering people with power tools controlled by the beard. But I also imagine a beard that grabs people and then just, like tentacles and just gets them. So that'd be great either way.
Yeah. I kind of want the idea of it be anyone with a beard is potentially the killer, or can be a killer.
True. I could see that. But yeah, when you think about like the connection to hair and horror, and you remember the story of Samson, how Samson had a lot of hair. Well, he was really strong because he had a lot of hair, but there's a part where it describes that he's at a party and he's so damn strong that he reaches over to get a glass of wine and he kills a servant by hitting the servant with his hand in the chest. And that's horror. I mean, talk about like, and it's sci-fi horror because this guy has like supernatural strength to the point where if he isn't paying attention, he just murders somebody by reaching out for a glass of wine. Well, that's his hair that gave him that. So it's hair horror. So there you go. The beard has kind of a rich cultural history.
Exactly. I can't do head horror. I can't speak to that very much. So.
Well, the beard could like go up and be whatever hairstyle the character wanted. So that's what's great about it.
Awesome, Jason. Well, we're at the roundup questions here. Time flew by fast. It's amazing. That's why my producer keep track of time for me. So I know we discussed this before. So Jason, what's better, practical or CGI?
Practical.
Yeah. Do you ever see were there ever changes where we go to the point where people go, I know we're doing it with like Terrifier 3, but like 20 years from now, people go, you remember a time these old movies that did everything practically?
I'm going to have to agree with you that, yeah, we're going to get to the point where you can make anything you want. However, physics, it's very hard for real life physics to be mimicked by CGI. Whenever you see people move in CGI, it's just wrong. And I think that it's hard because you want to use stunt doubles, but there are some things you just can't volunteer humans to do. You don't want to set them on fire or rip them apart. That's a lot of money, and you're gonna have to hire another one if the shot goes wrong. So I see where CGI has to happen, but look at how beautiful horror films were back in the day because they didn't have CGI. They had to use imagination and darkness and light and good acting. So I'm always going to be a CGI guy, and they're still going to make CGI movies in the future.
Oh yeah. I think the practical is why The Thing is 42 years old and still looks great.
Yeah, that's sad to admit that, but you are correct, sir. And no offense to anybody involved, but it looks better than the sequel, and the sequel uses CGI.
Yeah, and we all remember the 90s with its bad CGI. So.
Oh, that could be great comedy. Some of that could be funny.
Oh yeah, it's hysterically bad, and this is why we love it, though.
True.
All right, so Jason, someone knocks on your door and gives you $1 million to make the next entry in an existing IP or franchise, what would you? They said you get to pick. What would it be?
What was something that? I would do something about a tulpa. A tulpa is something that you don't see often used, and especially because quantum physics has proven that Higgs boson particles are real.
Mm-hmm.
So a tulpa would be terrifying. That's an image of that a person creates in their head that actually becomes real and starts to do terrible things. The mirror world in the occult, the mirror world is this very, very terrible place where spirits get trapped in. And you kind of saw that with Oculus, where it was about a haunted mirror.
Right.
But a person whose soul gets trapped in the mirror world, that would require CGI, but it would be fat. It would be like the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So that'd be fun.
Awesome. All right. So just any advice for anyone getting into the field, whether it's being a comedian or script writing or acting?
Be very careful who you work with. They might want you to waste your time. Really think about how much time you're spending on the product, and if you're just going to write a script, and then unless you're being paid for the meetings, don't volunteer to have a meeting over and over and over again, because that, for a person trying to make it in Hollywood who's a comedian and an actor and a writer, that can really eat up that person's time. And there is a tendency, I've noticed, a bad tendency in Hollywood and elsewhere, where they want you to write something, but they also want you to go to Zoom meetings every Tuesday night at 7. And then the meetings aren't productive, and the people you're talking to are not remembering the information. That any writer making in Hollywood should try to get a lot of things down in writing, try to get that contract first. And you know, as much as there's the fantasy of writing, there's the reality of it. And the reality that comes down to how much time do you have, and is it worth it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. You know, I remember I would talk to Carl Gottlieb a while ago, and he's like, he's read his book about Jaws and the writing of Jaws. That he's literally almost chained to a desk writing the script for the next day for months.
And that's another thing, is writing a script. It's like a book goes through what's called the galleys, where they keep rewriting the book and telling you to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So scripts, and scripts can really change depending on, especially like if you have to add a new character because, you know, it's producer's cousin. But the rewrite, the good news is, I don't think anything gets worse from rewriting. If you edit and rewrite, it does get better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know at one point a person should stop. Perhaps 7 or 8.
All right, Jason, you ready for your random horror trivia question?
Go for it.
All right. The tagline: sleep all day, party all night, never grow old, never die. It's
Lost
fun
Boys.
to be a vampire. Yep. Exactly right.
That was the poster. Yeah.
Yes. All right, Jason. So before we go, give us all your social media handles where people will find you, follow you, and learn everything about you.
I go by Jasen T Davis, Jasen. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, and you can check out my website at jasentdavis.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jason, for joining us tonight. And as always, I'm Graveyard. Follow us on all social media at PodOutatNight. And if you are interested in our new weekly review show that just posted 13 minutes ago, wherever you get your podcast, it's the month of Salem, where we dedicate our entire month to all his favorite movies. So go check it out. And we'll see you next time. And don't get lost in the void. Good night.